Hello, everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. And we have such a special co-host today. You might know his work as a screenwriter from films like Disturbia, maybe a couple Paranormal Activity films thrown in there. You might know his work as a director. Maybe you've seen, Scout's Guide to the Apocalypse, or, this little humble film called Freaky? Or maybe you're a fan of one or both Happy Death Day movies? Things that land on people's best of horror movies of the year lists. That is right, I am talking about the absolutely fabulous, ab-fab, Christopher Landon. Something that you might not know about Chris is that his father is Michael Landon, who was a very big television star throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Best known for his roles on Bonanza, if you're one of my parents out there, or Little House on the Prairie, if you're one of somebody like me out there. That is relevant to this conversation for reasons you are about to find out. I am so excited for this conversation because Chris is just honestly a tremendous conversationalist, a shining star this man is. And then later, of course, we will have one quick thing before I go. And because this is my podcast and it's my rules, that one quick thing is going to be about Elle Fanning. Let's get on to the main event with Christopher Landon. Christopher Landon, I am so appreciative that you would take the time to join us for this. You're one of my favorite directors, and this is a real honor to be able to talk about movies with you.
Well, I am very, very honored to be here with you, and I love to talk about movies. I could do it all day, much to my husband's chagrin. But yeah, and I think that we have this kind of unspoken agreement that I will endure talk of sports.
Oh, okay.
And so I get to torture him with lots of movie talk, and then he can torture me with sports talk. So it's fair game.
Well, but in the truly opposite of a conversation about sports, you have brought one of the just such an incredibly compelling text for us to discuss today. As far as a character that has made you feel seen, Chris, who have you brought for us to discuss?
Well, today I have brought the eternal classic, the eternal camp classic, I guess I should say, Mommie Dearest.
Mommie Dearest.
And of course, we'll be focusing on Christina, a character, a real human being,
a real human being
that really made me feel seen.
And so, how old were you when you first experienced Mommie Dearest?
So it's weird because I think back, and I know that I saw this film for the first time when I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. I'm going to say 7, just to try and make my parents look slightly better.
I was maybe 5 when I saw Hellraiser, so there's no judgment in that context.
But I remember, I saw this film, and then it just became, my older sister and I were sort of movie buddies. And we had, like most children, I think, you have certain films in sort of a constant rotation.
Yeah.
And this was definitely in our top 3. We watched this movie again and again and again. I don't know why we owned it. We owned we own a VHS copy of this movie. And I know as sort of a burgeoning queer kid, like the cover alone was like,
right.
Oh, I need to see this. This is important cinema.
Yeah. I don't know, but something inside me just feels compelled toward this.
Yeah. And look, I should preface this immediately by saying that, I was not beaten with wire hangers. I did not go through the kinds of crazy and awful abusive things that happened in this film. But I did very much relate to so much that was in it as a child. And so to have such an immediate connection to something in such a bizarre way, but it spoke to a certain kind of specificity in my life. And so I think that's what really drew me into it. And then, of course, I think it was, just the over the top performances, the camp, just everything spoke to me.
And what was that specificity that you found a kinship in?
The movie is set in Los Angeles, specifically Beverly Hills. It is, obviously Joan Crawford was a celebrity, and my dad was a celebrity and a relatively famous actor. Mm-hmm. And so the world was familiar. Like, I understood what it was like to sort of exist in this very long shadow.
And you felt like this movie successfully evoked that feeling that you had. Like, it painted that world correctly for you.
Yes, it did, because, what it did do correctly. And again, I think what's interesting about it is that, when I was a kid, I don't think I understood just how broad and sort of ridiculous it was. But I think when you are a child, in the way that a lot of sort of animation and sort of any kind of entertainment that's really sort of geared toward children tends to be not very subtle.
Okay, yeah.
A bit over the top, and that's, I think, that's sort of where kids begin. Mm-hmm. It's how we really start to understand things. We have to see them in bold. Mm-hmm. And so that's what this movie was doing. Yes. And I just was like, oh, okay. But it just kind of did a lot of interesting things. Joan Crawford was a larger than life person. And I think most celebrities are. And when you grow up with a person who is in the spotlight, who is sort of being, deified and, celebrated and worshiped by adoring fans and all of this stuff, it really is this kind of, you see that person, and even though they're your parent, you do see them in that light mm-hmm. too. And they kind of feel sort of bigger and untouchable. And I saw that in the film, mm-hmm. and I thought, oh, okay, so here's a girl who kind of knows the deal. But also kind of, I saw things too that were like, yeah, but it's not always fun.
Right.
And sometimes they're raging narcissists, and they, only think of themselves. And I'm not saying that about my dad, but it is a common denominator, uh-huh. I think, with a lot of celebrities. And so there were just a lot of things in the film that I recognized. So it's weird, but yeah.
Why can't you treat me the way I would be treated by any stranger on the street? Because I am not one of your fans!
Was a feeling of recognition in that way something that surprised you to experience in sort of any context, or did you feel like you had contemporaries around you, like friends and peers and such, who you also had that, like, you could see each of your lives in one another, or was this kind of rare experience to see?
This is rare.
Oh, wow.
This was rare. It was very rare. I did not, it's interesting. I did not grow up around a lot of celebrities mm-hmm. And their kids. Mm-hmm. It was something that my dad, I think, very intentionally chose to avoid, mm-hmm. because he didn't want us to, ironically, did not want us to grow up in that world, mm-hmm. even though we were growing up in that world. Yeah. But he didn't want to sort of, I don't think he wanted it to be exacerbated by that. And so we didn't have this. And so I didn't see it. Yeah. And I actually, for a period of time, I think the way that a lot of kids do, I kind of thought I was the only one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was both exciting and also very strange and lonely, because we would go out to public places, and everybody would like stare at us, mm-hmm. and sort of people would come up to him, and it was a whole big thing. And I didn't know how to process that, and it was really strange and hard for me to understand that as a child, to understand what was really going on there. And feeling like my dad belonged to everyone, and not just me. And so again, I think there's little moments in the film where you see Christina really more sort of playing with sort of the idea of wanting a little piece of it for herself.
Yeah, that's a really interesting aspect of this movie, is how subtly it shades that in.
Yeah, which I think it's a real thing, mm-hmm. Like it's a real thing. Like I remember sort of like, I was a very shy kid. growing up, but then there was still that aspect of like, if you knew there was like a photographer nearby or someone that was taking pictures, you kind of suddenly like find yourself like creeping out from behind that leg to be like, get a little light on that face. You know, like just like weird stuff that's very human nature stuff. Sort of this, I want to be invisible, but I want some of that attention. And
I want to be able to self-select into this a little bit.
Yeah. And by the way, I think my career choice speaks to that. You know what I mean? Like, I never wanted to be an actor because that's too full on. Like, that's too much. But like, okay, maybe if I'm behind the camera, I don't know. It's weird. And I'm starting to scare myself, but
I have to add in, just for those out there listening, if you haven't experienced Mommie Dearest yet, this is based on the memoir of Joan Crawford's adopted daughter, Christina Crawford. And it is an unsparing look into her life growing up, often mistreated, abused in many ways. And the movie renders this with the fabulous, singular Faye Dunaway, who was really gunning for an Oscar when she took this role. And it was not appreciated upon its release for the credibility cinema that I think it aspired to be, but has, as Chris said in introing it, the camp classic Mommie Dearest persists as an incredible piece of pop culture lore. And I have to ask, as the burgeoning young gay, can you remember how you felt the first time you witnessed that opening montage of, we don't see her face. We see her ablutions. We see her scrubbing routine and her shower routine and her walk-in closets. Can you remember that first experience of that opening in Mommie Dearest?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
God.
Yes. And and again, not gonna lie, there was a lot of my mother. There was a lot of my mother in there. So my mom was a model when she was young, and she was statuesque and she was beautiful, and she was one of those people that, you know, everywhere she went, sort of, you know, heads turned. She was very pretty, and as she got older, and what's interesting is that I really started to really focus on this movie not long after my parents' divorce, and so I think my mom was really going through a lot. We're gonna get real deep here tonight, guys.
I will go as far as anybody is willing to take my hand and walk with me.
But I think, you know, as someone who was sort of going through an enormous amount of personal turmoil, who felt that her beauty was fading, it was very normal for me to sort of find my mom rigorously trying to maintain her body and her face. And it was a lot, and there was hours tied to this regime, and she did have like the giant walk-in closets that went on forever. I remember like her walk-in closet also had like a sitting room where like her hair would dry under massive lamps. Whoa. And like, it was super cuckoo bananas like kind of stuff. And, you know, often she would be like in a big like long silk robe with like a turban on her head with like cold cream on her face.
That is like, exactly this opening sequence. Wow.
And so it was, and again, so when I'm watching this, I'm not watching this movie, the opening of this movie, like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was watching it like, oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, this is what they do.
That's what happens at home.
She does it too. And that really was outside of the crazy abusive stuff, you know.
Yeah.
There was just so much to recognize that didn't make me blink at all, you know. And it's, you know, it's just such a strange thing to kind of find so many parallels in such a terrible movie.
That is it's so fascinating how this figure of Joan in this film can, like, is in combination echoed not just one of your parents who had this high public profile, but both of them in sort of their
a combination.
That's nuts.
It sort of brought my parents together in a lot of ways. You know, and my mom again was she was a big personality, and she was And she was incredibly funny and dry and witty and clever and always smarter than every man in the room, but not allowed to be, you know?
Right. That aces trumps kings moment at the table.
Your aces, Jody.
Glad you think that, LD, because aces beat king.
Not in Hollywood, dear.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, there was so much of that. And she also was prone to the occasional flip out. And not with us, but like she could blow her top. And again, it just reminded me sometimes of, it's not that she was going to be out, you know, with giant shears hacking up a, you know, rose garden, you know.
Hand me the axe, Christopher.
Yeah.
Tina! Bring me the axe!
It was this funny, sort of felt like sometimes an exaggeration of my life, you know. I could see my mom getting really mad at us in her cold cream and it looking like some kind of fucked up Beverly Hills kabuki theater, like, you know. But I remember even as a kid, and this was, I think, sort of the gay side of it, you know, appreciating it so much. Like, I remember my sister and I, we weren't scared of this movie.
I was going to ask, what was the thing that drew you to it, like, over and over? Was it the thrill? Was it the horror? Was it the, like, just the camp of it, as you say?
It was the horror of it in many ways. But, like, I remember, you know, when she does the wire hanger scene.
No wire hangers! What's wire hangers doing in this closet when I told you no wire hangers ever?
And at the end of the scene, you know, when she says, like, you know, clean this mess up or whatever she says there. But she did this, like, fucking crazy thing with her eyes.
Yeah.
Like, she crosses her eyes.
When she leans to exit the frame, she does, like, cross her eyes. I noticed that watching it this time, and I hadn't before. Like, what did she just do with her face?
And we would rewind it again and again, and we would die laughing. Like, we knew it was funny, and we were losing it, but at the same time, we were also, like, scared and thought, oh my God, this woman's a fucking nutcase, and she's so mean. You know, but there were other times too where I was like, you know, Christina's a brat.
She
kind of deserves it.
She's not. And I found what I really focused in on when I watched it this time was like the lore around this movie, like its cultural cachet is that, like, look at this fucking nightmare that is Joan Crawford. The wheels come up and, like, but watching it this time, I really was like, yes, this is not flattering, because if this is the truth, then it wouldn't be flattering. This is very bad. But at the same time, I was fascinated how much I was catching this time. This movie doesn't hate Joan Crawford. No. This movie sees Joan Crawford actually quite tenderly. And I was reading an excerpt from a review by, I think, was it Vincent Canby? From when it came out, I believe, who was saying that, like, this movie where the memoir makes Joan Crawford kind of a one-dimensional, like, stock character villain, in the movie she is positively alive. And I was really, like, clear up to the end, the heartbreaking love that they seem to have for one another, like, it is still, like, you see her daughter's face light up when her mom surprises her and stops by and comes to the door after this life of turmoil with her, but she can still make her happy and make her pleased in a way that nobody else can, which is the great trick of embattled relationships with parents. Yeah. But I was really fascinated this time to not walk away being like, man, Joan Crawford, the fucking villain. It was like, Joan Crawford did bad stuff and tragic.
Yeah.
Fucking tragic.
Yeah. I mean, most of these people come from such broken homes, such broken situations, and there's so much pain. And obviously it's the driver, you know, and again, stuff that I saw with my dad. My dad grew up, you know, with this, and again, another fascinating connection. and I knew this as a child because my dad was very open and very vocal about it. He grew up with a very abusive mother, physically abusive mother. And so again, these lines that I kind of drew to this movie, because I knew like, oh, that's something that Dad talked about, you know, with his mom. She would probably do something like that to him. And what's interesting about the movie is that in all of its sort of camp and all the sort of amazing, funny things that sort of we can take away from it, the weird thing is that I feel fairly confident that, like, had you been a fly on the wall in a room and many of these kind of moments that inspired these scenes, they probably weren't too far off. You know what I mean? Like, I believe that. I believe her. I believe that this is kind of who she was. It's just that I don't think that people could really handle that, you know? It's hard. There's such a fine line, you know? And sometimes when you present something in its reality and its truth, it feels like it's fake. It feels false, you know? And so, I mean, how many times have you been in a situation where you're like, oh my God, if this were in a movie, no one would believe it. Yeah. And I think that was Joan Crawford's life. Yeah. I think you're right. That was that home life. Like, you couldn't, and that's why I think, especially again, as a kid, it never read as camp to me. You know, it felt very believable and very honest, even though it was bad shit.
It also really hit me watching it this time that the first time that they start telling her in the movie that she's getting old, I looked up, I was like, when was Joan Crawford fucking born? And it was like, it's a little after 1940, I think, that they're telling her this. And I'm like, Joan Crawford's like 36. Yeah. Like, when they start telling her this, she's like maybe 36 years old.
Yeah, she's dried up at 36.
Yeah, like, you're getting older. I was just like, oh my God. And then, like, thinking of like how Mildred Pierce was such like a resurgent role for her. She needed the part. She was desperate for the part. And it was like, because she was a has-been. She was losing the studio money. She was Hollywood royalty, but her best days were behind her. And she was maybe 38 years old.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. But that was the way things were. And still are. Yeah. in many ways. But God, I mean, so much worse than, and how just sort of unbelievably disposable women were to men and to the system. And again, I think, and so much emphasis on beauty, you know, and youth. And I watched my mom step into the ring every day with her gloves on, trying to fight, you know, an opponent she could never beat. And so it was really, 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 really tough on her, really tough on her. And I even as a child, I could see it and understand it in ways that I don't think most kids should or would, but I really did, you know? And so I related a lot to that and what I saw in the film.
We are going to take a quick break, but we will be right back to talk more with Christopher Landon, and we will get around to his story about sharing an elevator with Faye Dunaway. The story is not going to go how you think it would, I guess, but it's going to be better than whatever you're assuming, so stick around.
Hi, I'm Dan McCoy.
I'm Stuart Wellington.
And I'm Elliot Kalin.
And the three of us host The Flophouse. It's a podcast where we watch a new bad movie and then we talk about it.
Dan, you say it's hosted by the three of us. We've had a lot of great guest co-hosts like Gillian Flynn, Jamel Bowie, John Hodgman, Jessica Williams, Wyatt Cenac, Joe Bob Briggs, Josh Gondelman, Roman Mars.
Yeah, and you said new movies. But what about the time we did Meatballs 2?
Okay, yeah. Sometimes we do older movies and sometimes we have guests, but mostly it's about us talking about like recent bad movies.
And don't forget about the ones where I made you do a role-playing game where you played cartoon dogs.
All right, yeah.
Shouldn't a promo be a really simple explanation about what our show's about? So what's the show about, Dan?
What's it about?
What's it about?
It's about friendship, all right? It's about our friendship and how we love each other.
The Flophouse. It's a podcast mostly about bad movies on Maximum Fun.
Do you sometimes wonder whatever happened to the kids at your school who really loved Star Trek?
You might remember a kid like me, the one who read the Star Trek novels and built starship models. I also took music classes to avoid taking gym classes that required showering after, but I don't see what that really has to do with...
Or a kid like me. I introduced myself to kids at my summer camp one year as Wesley, but when the school year started and some of those kids were in my new class, I actually had to explain to my friends that I had tried to take on the identity of my favorite Star Trek character. The shame haunts me to this day.
I'm sure some of those Star Trek fans from your childhood grew up to have interesting and productive lives, but we ended up being podcasters.
On The Greatest Discovery, you'll hear what happens to two lifelong Star Trek fans who didn't grow up to be great people, but just grew up to be people who love jokes as much as they love Trek.
So listen to our new episodes every week on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Back to Feeling Seen, where today the writer and director Christopher Landon is talking with me about the movie Mommie Dearest. Now, and you know, you can't speak for everybody, but I just from your own position, what is it about? Why are these figures, the Joan Crawfords, in a moment like now, the Cate Blanchetts? There's the, queer icons, these divas of screen, these divas of entertainment and pop culture, these bigger than life sort of and world-wrecking figures. What is it about that imparts that status of queer iconography to it? What is, in your even just own experience, why is that the flame that draws the gay moths to it? Why is it so powerful? As somebody who loves it, I guess I would have my own reasons, but I'm wondering what you think they are.
I just don't think that, there isn't one reason. Yeah. I can say that much. I think there's a myriad of reasons. I think that many, I can't say all, because I don't want to sort of cast that wide of a net, but I think many, many men, gay men, specifically grow up with at least one woman that embodies these qualities. Mm-hmm. They may not be the whole package. They may not be full Joan, but you might. But I do think that, and they tend to be they tend to be our role models and our allies. Our protectors, the people that make us feel seen. And it's not always a mother, it's a friend, it's an aunt, it's there's different versions of her. But I think that we're very drawn to them. And again, it speaks much more, I think, to the role model aspect of it too. I don't think that a lot of gay boys look up to their fathers in the way that straight boys do. Because there's a disconnect. Yeah. And I think that we're so busy trying to either sort of undo something or fix something and want that approval. But when it comes to sort of just this sort of person that you're looking up to, that you see that embodies the sort of qualities that you want to have as a human being, it's these women. And again, I think gay boys and gay men have always been very drawn to glamour and to beauty, to things that are refined. And
I've heard you speak very passionately about Elvira before, and her being
God, and I was obsessed. And it's again, you see it again and again and again. Where it's so funny, and now it's we have new versions of these women. We have, like you said, you've got Cate Blanchett. You've got, even the modern pop versions like Dua Lipa. What fucking gay man doesn't look at Dua Lipa and be like, oh, I want to be her?
Absolutely.
She is gorgeous and tall and confident and all of it. It's all of it. So, I think that it's something that we definitely are drawn to. And I'm sure there's much sort of deeper things that play there, but at least at face value.
Yeah, there's a philosophy podcast you can go on and talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And something I was thinking about watching this, like a staple part of your career in genre is the tenderness that your movies have, like the heart and the vulnerability that is just really, it seems like, embedded in your stories, no matter what genre it would be, but you play in the sandbox a lot of horror. Wonderful, like, familial connections, wonderful, like, mothers who, even if they aren't perfect, they're doing their fucking best, just lovable and loyal. Like, Carrie Ann Moss in Disturbia is one of my favorite screen moms of all time. And then obviously we have like the mom who's having a hard time, but she's just so devoted and doing her best in Freaky. And then in the Happy Death Day movies, like the specter of this mother is just so big and great because she was so wonderful that like you have in 2 movies devoted to our heroine Tree, the wonderful Jessica Roth, coping with losing her. And I wondered when did that start expressing itself in your storytelling, where that just became something you would so consistently treat with such like tender gloves?
The question is, why am I a mama's boy? Okay. I think, again, I can only speak from my own experience, my own upbringing. But my mom, for all her kookiness and all her sort of flaws, she was a protector, a fierce protector of her children. And it's interesting, the older she got, the more she grew into her maternal side. And she bloomed late in life. And so I sort of had a weird... I mean, it was harder on me as a little kid because I didn't have a traditional mom who like drove me to school and made my lunch and just did normal mom stuff. Like my mom would come, I shit you not, to back to school night. She came to slay.
Wow.
She came to turn every man's eye, and she would literally, I remember one time, she wore like a mini skirt with fishnet stockings and like these crazy fucking 12-inch heels. And
oh
it's
my
like,
God.
She was
Your
fond
mom
of wigs.
was a queer icon.
She was a queer icon. And you know, that's who she was as a mother of a child.
Yeah.
But then as I got older, she really did start to kind of ease into this other sort of phase of her life, and she became really sweet. And that really kind of reached into my work. And then my mom passed away this was probably about, it's 7 years ago.
Sorry.
Yeah, but the Happy Death Day movies were me very much working out that loss. And so that's why there's so much of that in those movies, because I was really, really going through it. And it's what's interesting about that too, is that, you know, Jessica is super close to her mom. She and her mom are best friends. They are incredibly close.
The one time I've interviewed Jessica Roth, we cried about our like moms and grandmas together in an interview.
So that's why she and I had this connection, you know, with the movie. We also just love each other because she's incredible. But yeah, there's just a lot of mom stuff on my mind. But I also just have so much respect now that I'm a parent myself. I have so much more respect for my parents and understand them so much more. I understand their vulnerabilities and their flaws so much more. And you forgive everything. And it's such a gift to have that, you know, to be able to kind of move past a lot of pain and see that, like, you know, everybody's just trying to figure their shit out. And there's no guidebook to being a parent. And so a lot of my work now, I try to examine all my characters with as much affection as possible, even in a horror film, even when people are dying brutally.
I think that's I think that is one of the most noteworthy things about your movies is how much affection you seem to imbue into every character that like we're meant to care about. We care about them because we know you super fucking do. Yeah.
But I think that, going back to Mommie Dearest, I think that the filmmakers had great affection for these characters, and it was there. Like, there's a lot of passion in that movie, maybe too much passion in that movie.
Maybe that's it.
Just a slight overdose of passion. But it is all there. And I really believe that Faye Dunaway really had so much deep appreciation and respect and love for Joan Crawford.
I think you're exactly right.
And it's interesting because, and Faye, forgive me, this is not meant to sound rude. Not that you'll ever hear this, but you never know. But a full circle Mommie Dearest moment for me was I was living in my, how old was I? I was in like my mid-20s. I was living in West Hollywood in this building called Shoreham Towers, which was right above the old Tower Records on Sunset, right? And Faye Dunaway moved into my building.
Oh my God.
Because she was renovating her house. And so she like wanted to be close. And I remember like catching a couple glimpses of her, fleeting glimpses of her, and like having like palpitations. Like I was freaking out. And then but what I discovered, which I'd heard, was that like people would always joke that like she had a very difficult time leaving that role behind. Like that she somehow just kind of stayed in that mode after Mommie Dearest. Like you see it in Supergirl, which is another movie that like I could unpack for days, because she's just like, she's still being Joan Crawford. Anyways, point being, I'm sitting in the lobby and all of a sudden Faye Dunaway storms into the lobby, and then she's wearing like this like pashmina wrap. And she storms in, and there was like a little concierge desk in the lobby, and she just storms in and she goes, "Where is Kookaroo?"
Oh my God, stop.
And I was like, oh my fucking God. She is Joan Crawford. She's totally Joan Crawford.
Wow.
She's still doing it. And that was real life. She had been driving around West Hollywood trying to find Kookaroo back when it was down there on La Cienega or whatever, and she got lost and she was furious, and she like came storming in, shouting it to like anyone who would listen,
Wow.
And
that is the most Hollywood moment with a capital H that a person could have.
It was, but I doubled down. Because she went to the elevator, so I like followed her like a creepy gay stalker. And I got into the elevator with her, and it was like so quiet. It was so uncomfortable. And I didn't know what to do, and I was like, how do I manage this feeling? Because I don't get starstruck.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been the type of person that gets starstruck, but she did it. She did it for me. And so I just looked at her, like kind of out of the corner of my eye, and I just gave her like a nod. And I went, and I literally said, "Faye." Like I was on a first name basis with her. And she goes, "Who the fuck are you?"
Oh my, yes. Yes.
I just couldn't help it. And she started laughing. And then I laughed. And I was like, "I'm so sorry. I'm a big fan." And she's like, "Oh, that's lovely, darling. What's your name?" And I told her my name.
Oh my God, that is perfect.
And this was all in this like quick elevator ride. And then the sad thing is I never saw her again. I don't know if I made her move out. I don't know if I just fucked it up. But it was amazing. But she really, that day in the lobby, I was like, wow, I couldn't figure out if she brought so much of herself to the role.
Right.
Or if it really just left its mark.
Well, I was reading just sort of like, seeing if I could find any of like her sort of thoughts on the movie earlier, but this quote really stood out to me. Just what you were saying, like in the way that you're like, I think she really like felt for Joan, and this where she says, this is from a Vanity Fair article, I think it was Aggregating, it says, quote, "Only God may ever know what passed between Crawford and her daughter, and in many ways, I think the relationship was the inevitable tragedy that comes from a child of want, which is what Crawford was, and a child of plenty, which is what the little blonde girl was." The little blonde girl. Faye Dunaway knows what team she is on, and it is not Christina Crawford.
No, it is Team Joan all the fucking way.
She made that fucking movie. She said the name Tina 6,000 times, and in an interview she's like, "That little blonde girl."
Yeah,
Oh
that's amazing.
my God, I died when I read that.
That's amazing.
And so you saying that just now, I was like, yeah, I feel like that has to be true based on just the implications that we can take for how Faye processed that. And her seemingly sort of, if not like full regret with the role, but like regret in how it was executed. It's to perhaps in her mind portray Joan in an unfairly unflattering light in a way that she seems to think should have been more even and fair to her. So yeah, right. I think we can, and that, I mean, what a perfect display. Who the fuck are you? You're like,
yeah, it was amazing.
You're like, that is the greatest gift you could have given me is this right now.
That was it. I didn't need anything else after that.
That is living the dream of like Twitter parlance in 2022 of like Faye Dunaway step on my neck. Like that is what happened to you.
It was beautiful. And she wasn't even, there was no condescension or cruelty or like there was just, she was funny. She was in on the joke with me. Yeah. You know, I appreciated it because I ended up in my one of my many careers working on I used to direct this show called Making the Video.
Oh yeah.
Documentary style, like, it was EPK.
Yeah.
For music videos. And
Loved making the video.
I was known as the Diva Wrangler.
Oh, okay. You had a way with them.
Well, I did sort of, I guess, just fell into it. But again, I had training. Uh-huh. I had people in my life. And so I worked with a lot of big personalities, and it was all women. And there were a couple that were big icons that really let me down.
Oh, no.
Those were not Faye Dunaway experiences, Like, I was, like, crushed because I was like, you're, like, really mean.
Oh, no.
you're, like, a horrible person.
Oh, no.
So she was a shining light in a world of dark. For me, at least.
Well, like you said, as you are a family man now. And I wonder, like, did you notice a distinct change in the way you started, in the way you express like affection within your scripts for people when you realized you were kind of experiencing the sense of like forgiveness for your parents of the past and like them doing their best? Like, was there a sort of priority shift for you for how you wanted to create people when you were raising your own?
Absolutely. It was a seismic shift in the kind of work that I want to do, the way that I want to portray my characters, how I want to see them, how I want to feel them. And it's not that I've given up on the darker aspects of my personality, and I'm still very much drawn to that stuff. But I mean, the movie that I'm working on right now, I think probably examines parenthood, specifically fatherhood, more than anything I've ever touched.
Yeah, we've got a lot of moms in your movies, and it's been fewer fathers. It's been many single moms.
Yeah, so this one is very much about, the emphasis is on the father-son relationship. And that was all very much about me working through a lot of my own sort of fears and insecurities as a parent. And also, again, going back to sort of the forgiving my dad for a lot of things that I now realize were not intentional things. They were just sort of things that he was doing his best, and sometimes their best is your worst. But yeah, it's had a big impact on that stuff and sort of the things that I choose to do. And also what's different now is that, before, and I say this, and marriage has also informed a lot of this as well. But, when I would make a film, be it directing or writing or whatever, it was another movie. Like it was a job. It was something fun. It was, and there was nothing else, and so now when I look at things, movies also represent time away from the people that I care most about, and so if I'm going to commit to something and really dive into something, I better fucking love it.
Yeah.
And need to make it if I'm not going to see my kids,
Yeah.
For long stretches of time. And, because it's a lot of sacrifice. It's really hard. I mean, it's fun, and I'm not here to be like, oh my God, boo-hoo, filmmaking. Because it's not that at all. I every single day I wake up feeling unbelievably grateful.
It's a cost benefit you grew up on the receiving end of too. And so
absolutely.
what that math feels like.
Absolutely. I try to be very careful now and really sort of try and put everything into something that I like enough.
Now, the thing that carries over from this movie is there's much of it, but no wire hangers really stands out as a cultural moment. And also, don't fuck with me, fellas, in the boardroom.
This ain't my first time at the rodeo.
We don't want any hard feelings.
You don't know what hard feelings are until I come out publicly against your product, and you'll see how much you sell.
Please, Miss Crawford. It's hardly necessary to make threats you surely don't mean.
Don't fuck with me, fellas! This ain't my first time at the rodeo. You forget the press I delivered to Pepsi was my power. I can use it any way I want.
As you got older and if you kept experiencing the movie, have you noticed a shift in the things that hit you hardest now that maybe they didn't hit you so hard when you were younger, but as you've, grown up and changed, that it's like, oh, this is the thing that really sticks with me, or this is the thing that really makes me cringe or makes me laugh? Yeah,
I mean, I think my sister and I, for shits and giggles, watched it, probably like 10 years ago.
You had to go back to it.
We will always go back to it. You know what I mean? I think it's sort of like, it's kind of like a check-in, like, how are you? Like, because that's something that we had to experience together.
Of course.
We laugh a lot, like, the scene where she has to sit at the dinner table.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God.
Forever.
Yeah. It's raw.
It's rare, not raw.
But it's got all this red juice when I push on it.
Then don't push on it. Darling, rare meat is good for you. The doctor said so. You are not getting up from this table until you have finished that meat.
It was a very Depression era, like old school way of sort of trying to teach kids lessons and things. And again, sort of speaking to the idea that that Joan grew up she didn't have the things that Christina had. And my parents were the same. My mom was the same. And so my mom did that to me. Like, I fucking had to sit at that table for hours when everybody was going to bed.
Looking at that raw steak on the plate.
Looking at that fucking, in our case, it was fish.
Hours with a piece of fish.
Fish. Cold fish. By the way, fish that had been somehow stuffed with American cheese that was whole and baked.
Ew.
So that when you cut it, the fish would belch American cheese. So gross.
Oh, God.
But so there's still kind of, things that would jump out more. I think what honestly really hit me the last time I saw it was the relationship, which is barely touched on, interestingly enough, between Christina and her brother.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That in the chaos of their lives, and when they are struck by the tornado that is their mother, that they would that she was very protective. They touched on that a bit. She would sort of care for him, and he would sort of check and care for her. And that was another thing that I remember because I was with my sister. That was something we both really, it was very moving to us, to see some of that, because we related to that as well. When my mom, would go through one of her sort of just, she would have these breakdowns because she was so broken and destroyed by her relationship dissolving with my dad. And we really kind of were each other's protection. And that's another thing that I think it really stood out for me the last time I saw the film. And it was such a thing that didn't cross my mind in any other viewing. So that's definitely something that stood out more. I still love the fucking swimming. I'm stronger and I'm faster and I always will be.
And I'll always beat you.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. And also there's this other thing that never gets old. And my sister and I will also do this to each other, is that sometimes we'll like, at Thanksgiving, we'll be sitting at the table, and you can't hear this. You have to see it. So I'll describe it after. But like sometimes she and I will just look at each other and we'll just stare like we're rubbing cream on our elbows. There's just
that
so
is
many...
totally like Carol Burnett, like tugging at her ear on national television.
Yeah.
Just the moisturizing the elbows.
It's so good. There's just, the movie has so many gifts. There's so many things to offer, so many things to keep. And I adore it. I really love it. And it can never get old. If it's ever on TV, which they don't really play it
just doesn't like come up on TBS.
No, this isn't like, it just doesn't pop up much. But man, if it ever does,
you're not turning it off.
I'm not turning that shit off. Not a chance. And I'm really wrestling with sort of like, like most parents are like, most dads are like, when can I finally show my son Star Wars?
Yeah.
And I'm like, when can I finally show my son Mommie Dearest?
Yeah, my dad was like, we're going to watch Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, like every parent's got their like, that's the one I want to show. And I'm like, okay. I'm not, like, it's really funny because I'm surrounded by all these, like, cool dads who are showing their kids, like, Indiana Jones. And I'm just like, all I want to show my kids is fucking Rosemary's Baby and Mommie Dearest.
We're going to watch Old Elvira, we're going to watch Vampira, and we are going to watch Mommie Dearest.
Yeah. They got no chance.
Chris, thank you so much for coming here and talking about this movie specifically and being so generous in conversation. It's the gift that keeps on giving when I'm able to have these kind of conversations with people. So I really appreciate you taking the time. This is wonderful.
I had a blast. Thank you, Jordan. It was super fun.
Thank you again to Christopher Landon for coming on the show. I'm not kidding when I say I've been hoping for so long that we could get him on here. He's very busy. He's making things all the time. It was just announced that he is going to be directing the new Arachnophobia, which he's going to be tremendous at. He has been spending the beginning part of this year finishing up the movie he made for Netflix. So this is a man on the go. We caught him in a free moment, and I could not be happier to have talked to him generally. But what a treasured moment to be able to talk to him specifically about Mommie Dearest. But now, like I said, it's one quick thing before I go. And that one quick thing is, it's hardly could be quick, deserves to be a dissertation. My thing today is about just Elle Fanning. It is Emmy season. It is for your consideration time. And I'm no voter. I'm no stakeholder. But I'm just sitting here. I'm just a girl sitting in front of a microphone asking the world to consider the depth and breadth of the work from Elle Fanning. And the reason this is on my mind is because I learned practically moments ago on this very recording day that the American Cinematheque here in Los Angeles, California, is doing an Elle Fanning tribute, a 2-night event where they will be honoring some of her works, and there will be a Q&A with her on one of the nights. They're going to show some of her TV work. They're going to show some of her film work. And among that film work, you guys, if you know me at all, you know how much this means to me. I am going to see, because of this tribute, I am going to see the Neon Demon on a big screen again for the first time since it came out theatrically. And that must have been 2016 because I saw it at the ArcLight Hollywood, rest in peace, in Hollywood on that big, beautiful, singularly crisp and clear ArcLight screen. That is where I saw the Neon Demon. That is where I cried among the probably 4 other people who were in the room with me, who were not having the emotional experience that I was. And even before that point, I was so hyped on Elle Fanning as just a generationally impressive talent. I kind of have sort of glibly referred to her in my own life as the Vanilla Princess. You can find that in my sort of Twitter history. But despite that sort of term of endearment nicknaming, she has had an audacious career. She has had a fascinating career, and it has been wonderful to see the chances she takes and the choices she makes in how she has evolved from a teeny tiny child, like, accompanying her sister in the movie I Am Sam, to the body and explosive performance she gives in The Great, to the incredible, conniving, micro-expressive, force of nature performance she gives in Neon Demon, to what she's doing now as really a difficult to watch protagonist central character in The Girl from Plainville, which you might remember a discussion about from when we had the wonderful Liz Hannah on the show. This is Feeling Seen Synergy. If you listen to that episode, you already know that I'm a big Elle Fanning fan. I just want to say shouts out to her. Shouts out to her fantastic career. Shouts out to every year when Cannes Film Festival comes around, and the thing I am most excited for is not to hear Thierry Frémaux say the latest stupid shit he's going to say about movies and what's good enough and what's not, but I am looking forward to every single Elle Fanning red carpet look that she is going to make a meal out of. This is an actress that just makes me so happy. Anya Taylor-Joy can run because Elle Fanning ran before her. It's not even a walk. It's not even a walk so others could run. She straight up has been running all this time, and she maintains a really low celebrity profile, so it's not like you're talking about her all the time. So I feel like whenever she comes out and delivers yet another sort of definitive performance, it's like, oh yeah, guys, remember that Elle Fanning is fucking amazing in kind of everything that she's in? She's always a delight and a surprise, and then she steps back and keeps to herself, and I think we would all love to see more celebrities who strike that exact balance. Thank you for your service, Elle Fanning, as a professional, as an actor. I cannot wait to see Neon Demon again on a big screen. See her definitive 21st century Hall of Fame performance as Jessie and the Neon Demon, alongside absolutely magnetic turns from the whole supporting cast, including Abby Lee, brief brilliance from Alessandra Navolo, incredible scheming from Jenna Malone, and the beautiful, terrifying iciness of Bella Heathcote. It's all gold from top to bottom. So that's the one quick thing. The one quick thing is my lifelong standship of Elle Fanning. And that is the show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorker on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher. And this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned.
Audience supported.